Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Tiffany Craig in the newsroom, along with Scott Noll, who is our investigative reporter, and here we go. I'm going to get your name right, Lindita Camaj. She is an assistant professor at the University of Houston, and we are talking about something called Sunshine Week. Nothing to do with the weather, nothing at all to do with the weather, more about educating the public about open government and why that is so incredibly important to all of you at home. So some of you are thinking, what does that even mean? This is why Scott's here, so tell them why it's important.
In general, I would say 80, 90, maybe even approaching 95% of the stories we do as far as investigations have at least one records request that's part of that. And it can be anything from just trying to get emails, any sort of government document, to recordings, pictures, all sorts of things. And these are the things that a lot of times the government will fight to try to keep from the public. They don't want people to necessarily know what's in a lot of this stuff. And the more they don't want you to see it is more reason you should want to see it.
Give us an example. What is an example of something that, okay, a story comes about and you get involved and you say, well, I need to get records, I need to get documents on this. So basically there's more of a story to tell there. What would be an example of that?
Most recently would be the investigation we did into the city's fire trucks. I had to get an inventory of all the fire trucks, what year they were purchased, and then figure out, all right, well, how many are past that 10-year shelf life that the city's replacement model is supposed to be. Once we got that, then we started getting into things like work requests. You know, what's broken down on these trucks? What are the firefighters saying to the mechanics is wrong with these things? So that was another round. We got some other maintenance records on them. You know, just things like that. A lot of times it'll start with one and then lead to another and another and another.
And I think maybe there's a bit of a misconception, and I think for years I didn't fully understand it either. Even from the time I became a reporter, you can't just call up the fire department. You can't just call up any kind of an agency and say, hey, can I get the information on this year and this fire truck and that sort of thing. It's not something that you can just ask for and get over a phone call.
May I correct you there?
You absolutely can. In most cases, at least, I know it's not.
Sure, that's actually the practice, and you're right in terms of practice, but per law, you should be able to, right? Just to kind of give a background in terms of why first of all, I think your audiences should know that not only journalists, but everybody, every single citizen and not citizen in the United States of America has the right to access to public records, has the right. And this is established by two different types of laws, right? There is the federal law, the Freedom of Information Act, that was institutionalized in the 50s, right? That gives the right to every citizen. And then each of the 50 states of the United States have their own local laws. For example, Texas has its own law that regulates in terms of how access is provided. Basically giving the right to everybody, but also setting some limitations and setting also procedures in terms of how do you go about accessing the information. One of the important things to just kind of, I guess, get back to what you were saying is that this law actually gives you the right to ask for information orally as well as in written. So you do not have to per law, they should provide you access to information if you only call them on the phone or went in person and asked for some documents or some kind of information that you are interested, and the governmental agencies or bodies do possess it.
I just know that in my experience, every time I do ask for something verbally on the telephone, I always get the, well, we need that in writing, and we need it kind of in that formal capacity outside of just simply asking for it.
Yeah, and then it'll go into the queue, and we'll have to research it and find the information, find the records that you requested, and then if there's anything that we could possibly go and find a reason to, we're going to send it to the Attorney General for an opinion, which is going to buy us another 45 business days.
It sounds to me like there's some frustration coming from over there.
Well, yes, and the reason why this is so is because there's a discrepancy between what law, the rights that law gives us, and how the law is practiced or implemented in practice, right? There's a huge discrepancy there, and this is not the case only with Texas. It's all over the world. I do actually lots of my research in Southeastern Europe, how those laws are implemented there is the same frustration, right? The laws do not work per se And one of the reasons why the laws sometimes don't work properly is because people are not using them. Most of the people or most of the entities using the laws are businesses, lawyers, journalists, but citizens most commonly do not use these laws. They are not the biggest stakeholders in terms of usage, right? Therefore, I think, and this is practice all over the world, the more the laws are used, the better they function. So I think I would actually suggest your audiences, the more they get engaged, these laws better. That will work.
So we're talking about the need for open government and sort of shining a light on it. And this week in particular, we as journalists, this is sort of one of the things that we're talking about this week. For those people at home, what would be an example of a freedom of information request that they might do? I mean, we know what ours would be, but what would something that someone at home might need this for?
Well, you can get, for example, data on budget uses, right? How different agencies within government are using the taxpayer money to implement different programs, right? So basically, that's some information. If you are interested to see where your tax dollars are going, right? FOIA law gives you the right to ask for that information because you are per law paying for those services, right? So you can ask, for example, the Department of Education, how much money is spending on different schools, for example, right? If you are a concerned mother or a parent, right, who has several children in school, but you are not satisfied with the services you are getting, you can ask about how much money is allocated to different schools, right? So that's an example, I think, of the practical information that the audiences can ask. The other things are personal, kind of information that pertain to personal data. I don't know, death records, birth certificates, stuff like that are maybe more related to sort of personal uses, or for example, catters or possession kind of documents.
Or even more simply, you're looking to move into a neighborhood, you want to know how many times the police been out to that neighborhood for disturbances there. I want to know what my neighborhood's going to be like. The realtor naturally has a reason to make it sound like a great neighborhood.
Right.
I can go and request that information from the police department.
I have an iPad here because for those of you who are joining us, your questions are more than welcome. We have two people here who know quite a bit about this, and they are here to take your questions and provide some answers. So I'm going to scroll and take a look and see if we've had any questions already. But in the meantime, Scott, you have a stack of papers there. Can you please tell us what that's all about?
So I mentioned earlier it's almost a routine now of you file a request for information, the agency says, well, I'm not sure if maybe there's a reason I can withhold that, so I'm going to send that to the Attorney General for an opinion. I mean, this is just a portion of Attorney General opinions I got on requests just in 2016. So
and these are stapled. There's more. This is 3 pages of information, or lack of maybe information, I guess.
Yeah, and in most of these cases, and a lot of what we run into, the Attorney General will side with the government agency and say, yeah, they don't need to release that. And that gets into the whole, what was the intent versus what is actually happening in practice.
So, Lindita, I have a question here for you. Any idea which state might be known as the most transparent, and how does Texas stack up against others?
That's a great question, honestly.
Thanks, Ty.
And I think actually there have been some studies that have looked at this, but unfortunately there are not studies that look at as many studies that look at the state level. There are lots of studies that look at the federal level. I don't know why there's so much interest. I guess because that law has been longer in practice. And actually there was a recent report that looked at how the federal agencies are implementing law, and they were looking at about 33,000 requests submitted to different agencies, right? And one thing that they found out was that actually very dark kind of information in terms of how well this is, and I have here some data. For example, they only, out of 33,000 requests that were submitted at the federal agencies, only 23% got full access to all the documents that they were asking for. Requests usually waited about 142 days, which is really very discouraging for people to want to use.
I'd kill for that kind of turnaround.
Exactly.
I mean, here's a federal one I filed March 12, 2013. Then last month, February 6, 2017, This is in regards to your FOIA request. In order to best utilize our limited resources, TSA has started to reach out to requesters whose requests have been in the backlog over 6 months to determine if they're still interested in pursuing their requests. That's 4 years later.
Yes.
And I still haven't gotten this stuff.
That is true. That is true. I mean, actually there are some reports that I have read that, particularly in Texas, what happens is when the Texas law was designed, they designed a system where the Attorney General must be asked for if the agency decides this particular information should not be public, they must ask the Attorney General to make that decision. But actually, I heard that this has been overused by lots of departments to delay the process because per law, every agency, governmental agency, has to respond to you within 10 days. But then if they decide that they need the approval of the Attorney General to come back to you, right, to give you access, that gives them another 45 days.
45
right?
business days.
Business days.
Yeah.
That's a great point to make, right? Which accumulates in the longer, and this generates delays because then the more requests Attorney General gets, the longer the delays, the longer the stashes of decisions he needs to make, and this generates more and more. So actually this is one of the things in terms of how the Texas, and this is not common to other state laws, right? Texas law is in particular in this design. And as I said, initially it was designed this way to help to actually facilitate requests. So agencies individually would not take this decision without somebody else telling, but it's backfiring a little bit, I think, in terms of how it's applied, because Attorney General in his office is, I guess, small compared to all the other agencies and the requests that come. So that's, I think, a little bit of a backfire in there. And definitely they've been called for the need to amend, to make some amendments to the Texas law because of this kind of roadblock that happens. So.
Yeah, I can tell you just firsthand, there's a lot of agencies that I deal with on a regular basis with requests where I just assume I'm not going to see this for 3-4 months, because no matter what it is, they're going to look for a loophole to send it to the Attorney General, and a lot of times the Attorney General is going to side with them. Sometimes they'll actually side with us. And we've actually had to file a complaint against a city agency here in Houston with the Attorney General because they just weren't producing anything at all.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Well, we need to also remind our viewers that Attorney General is at the last stop, right? If you are denied, then the next stop is court, right? You need
Sure.
to, you can file, I guess, complaints with the courts with regard to that decision if it's a final decision. But I guess that the biggest problem is getting to a decision sometimes because of these delays.
Exactly. I mean, think about that. If I get a tip on a story today and I need to file a records request, assuming what I'm looking for is in that first set of records, you may have just bought that agency 3 months.
For sure.
And then if I need more records to prove it up, you can add another 3 months. And all of a sudden, what should be a relatively quick investigation, something I can put on TV quickly, is now pushed 3, 6, 9, 12 months down the road because agencies know how to play the game. They know how to take advantage of this system.
So we have some more questions coming in, but I would like you to just address something that someone brought up. A few people actually did. There's some suggestion that perhaps this week and this scenario is going on because of the new administration. It has nothing to do with who is president now.
No.
Can you just address that? Because I think maybe some people just need that clarified.
Sure, for sure. I mean, again, because the struggle for transparency is not a new struggle, right? It has been there since the dawn of the government, I think. Because till the FOIA laws were introduced into practice, most of the governments were closed, right? There was this kind of attitude that all information that is produced by the government is owned by the government. And then the Freedom of Information laws were devised. This actually gave a possession of the information to the people. It switched this relationship. But of course, as you can imagine, governments all over the world have a problem with giving ownership of this information to the people. Therefore, there have been lots of mechanisms to, I guess, obstruct this transfer of ownership of information. So it's not a new struggle at all. Actually, it's a struggle that has been going on in all administrations, going back to the, I don't want to go and name all, but all of them, all of them.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually Ty has a follow-up question. Are text messages made on tax-funded cell phones open to public viewing?
Yes, yes. Basically, every every single information that is produced by a governmental official on governmental duty, basically using their phone, their phone record, including phone records that are used for business use, right? And also emails that are used, or electronic communication that are used for business use. They're all kind of prone to the FOIA records.
And then toll money and how it's used. That's another one that someone wants to know about.
Toll money. Well, this is, I think, a bit of more of a complicated issue, because freedom of information law here in Texas does give you access to information that is possessed by different governmental agencies, right? But not necessarily to information that is possessed by private businesses. So it depends on what kind of a relationship are the companies that do manage the tolls. In terms of, are they hired by the government, are they third parties? So it depends on this relationship between the institution or the department of transportation and the business private who does manage the tolls.
Well, we actually talked about this beforehand. Let's say somebody wants to look at information like that. How do they even begin the process? Where do they start?
Yes, and actually study after study, including the study I just mentioned earlier, show that there are certain ways where you can actually improve your chances of accessing information, and maybe also kind of close the gap in terms of delays. And the first thing is do your homework, right? This is really the first major step. And what I mean by do your homework, first of all, you need to know exactly what type of information are you looking for. Now, this is kind of tricky because not all the time we know the name of the particular document or the information, but the more specific you are in your request. I need to know the 2014 income from the toll on 59 or whatever, I-10 or something like that.
Yeah.
The more specific you are in your request, the better your chance to actually get to the information.
And which agency actually has that information.
That's the second step, yeah. Which agency possesses, where to actually go and ask for that information. That's also crucial that you know. And also, who is the person responsible? Because this is the other thing in terms of freedom of information law. It does oblige each agency to establish an office, right, and have officers who deal with FOIA requests. So your chances are better if you know who this person is, who is this officer, what's his name or her name or in contact information, and contact them directly instead of just sending it generally to somebody in the agency. So those are some of the kind of things that would probably accelerate and also know your laws. Honestly, lots of the time the delays happen because the party requesting the information or the party handling the request don't know the exact specifics of the law, right? So the better you know the law and what specifies the law, the better chances. And the more you use that lingua, the language specified by the law, it shows that you know what you're asking, you know your rights, therefore better your chances.
Let's say somebody wants to do this and they think, well, okay, how do I write the letter? Forget who I address it to. What do I say in the body of the letter?
Exactly.
I don't even know what to say. So what would you tell those people? Where can they go to get maybe a sample or just see something that's been done?
Well, first of all, I actually recommend, and this is not the recommendation coming from me, but lots of research done in this area, is try going in person if you can. If you can, please go in person. Again, experiments have shown that if you go in person, your chances are better to actually get the information. Then, if you can do then kind of look at sort of digital communication or phone or something like that. There are a couple of sites that help you generate these letters. The best one to use within here, I think Texas is one that is actually, if you go to the Freedom of Information Foundation of Texas, they do have in their websites they do have a template letter there that you can use and then just draft, fill in the information you need and then just send it to the appropriate agency you want.
Tell us again where that is.
For Freedom of Information Foundation of Texas, it's FOITF.org.
Okay.
Yes.
Say that slowly. Got it.
Good.
And another thing that I think a lot of people get bogged down in is know what you're after. What are you asking for? Because if you go and ask for everything but the kitchen sink, that's when you start getting into, okay, well now we're going to charge you for copies, we're going to charge you for research time and all that.
Right.
And so if you have a good idea what you want, reach out to that agency and say, I'm looking for this, what should I request? Because the bigger and broader your request is, the more likely you're going to get hit with a big bill.
Yeah, and that's a very good point, because per law, they are not, officers in the agency, they are not obliged to go and compile data for you, right? The law doesn't ask them to do this. They are only ask them to give you access to whatever they already have handed, right, kind of handy, but not compile and do it in the format you want it, right? So that must be a bit, so basically the more precise the better, right, for sure.
So Rodney has a question, and I believe it's directed at you. So you're saying that regardless of one's FOIA request, it can be denied by the state AG? I think that's what he sort of took away from what you were saying.
Not regardless. There has to be a reason or a precedent, some prior decision that says this is exempt. But, you know, we talked about it a little beforehand. One example was there was an incident just west of here, late last summer, I think it was, where a truck went and hit a bridge. A section of that bridge collapsed onto a vehicle, and there were deaths as a result of it.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And that bridge had previously been struck. So we wanted to know, after that, the first time that bridge was hit, what did the inspection show? Why was this bridge okay to resume being used, for lack of a better term?
Right.
After the second incident, TxDOT actually came in and demolished that bridge altogether. So initially we put in a request, they said no, that's exempt information. So then once the bridge was demolished a few weeks later, we said fine, give it to us now. That bridge is gone. Nothing about that bridge still stands. And they still went and said you can't have it because of a carve out in the law that says if information is used to determine how federal highway funds are going to be used, then they don't have to release it. So because there was that carve out, we couldn't get that. They've cited the same thing on pavement condition index, they call it, where they go and inspect the roads. We wanted to know, all right, well, in the state's opinion, what are the worst highways in the Houston area? Because that information is used for federal highway funding decisions, the state said TxDOT doesn't have to release that to us. Even though those are your roads, you paid for that test to be done, that test is going to be used in a decision how to spend more of your tax dollars. You can't get access to it.
Are you surprised by that?
Actually, I mean, I don't know the specifics of this relationship between these agencies, but I'm not surprised. Anytime there is a reason to deny or there's a loophole they can use, it happens very often, honestly, because it's the easiest thing to do, right? Going and finding those. But I need to, again, specify that usually the law also specifies exceptions, right, in terms of what you cannot access. And that's important for your viewers to know what are those exceptions, right, before they go and ask for something that it's a lost cause, so to speak. And those include personal information or personal records about people, right? If you want to know somebody's driver's license, well, good luck. You are not going to get that kind of personal information or social security number or something like that.
Or date of birth now.
Date of birth, yes.
That is now protected information
as well. And then some information that pertain to law enforcement, especially with regard to ongoing investigations, right? If there's an ongoing investigation and releasing that data might compromise somehow the investigation, then they are not fall within exceptions. And information also collected and maintained by judiciary, again, for ongoing cases. And ultimately, private individuals and businesses are not covered by the law. Even businesses who are contracted by the government. So if the government contracts a third-party private business to do certain paved roads, so to speak, right? Even they are contracted to public service, they are still not covered by the law. And to some degree, maybe this might somehow explain. But again, so those are some of the limitations.
And I mean, how many times have you gotten requests from somebody saying, hey, I want you to get these business records?
Oh, yeah, plenty.
And there's nothing that allows us, except for a very narrow scope of nonprofits and things like that. There's nothing that allows us to go in and say, hey, shop owner, turn over your books to me. It doesn't work that way.
If only it was that easy. If only. So, okay. What is the most surprising thing you found in a public document? That is a giant question, but what is the most surprising thing you found in a public document that you got back and you thought, yes, like it was worth my while to go through this hassle, and here's what I've got?
And most surprising ever, I don't know.
We stumped him.
You did. A lot of times it's stuff that's, you're not sure why anybody thought it was a good idea to write that or to put that in there in the first place. Emails are a perfect example. Because again, assuming it's done on company time within your official scope of work, that's public record. And eventually you're probably going to get some version of that. Now, certain parts of it may be blacked out or what have you. But there are things that I've seen that you just wonder, when did it seem like a good idea to put that in your public email in the first place?
Sure.
We'll just leave it at that.
Okay. So Rodney, I think I'd asked one of his questions in the past. I think what he was saying, sort of following it to something you're saying, he's like, well, what if someone doesn't have a law degree and to understand this basic understanding of what to do? What about people who don't? Because I think maybe it sounds kind of complicated.
Sure.
So is there a website or somewhere that people can go so they can kind of break it down and make more sense out of it? Because I have no law degree either. It is still like a learning process for me. And I know you're still learning things as we go. I mean, there's always something
Well, and it's
new.
always changing, too.
Right.
Every time the legislature is in session, they can change a law.
Right.
Or there's a judicial decision or an attorney general's decision
That is
can now
right.
set precedent for everything down the road.
Yeah. So is there
Well,
a site
yes,
or
I
somewhere
think-
people can go?
The Freedom of Information Foundation of Texas actually is a great resource for your viewers. They have their different elements of different of law. Especially they kind of explain all these, how the law works. They have lots of shortcuts. You can see the law there, right? You can access the law from different sources, right? But they have the original of the law, like the original piece, and then they have also shortcuts how to read through the law. They do have that letter generator. They provide lots of very good resources, I think, for your audiences and anybody that can help them navigate the system a bit better. I think another resource that might be helpful to your viewers is, because one of the first stumbles or problems is to understand who possesses what information. So there are certain resources where you can go and look at to find out what kind of documents are possessed by different agencies, right? For example, FOIA.gov is a great resource as well, and this one is maintained by the U.S. Department of Justice.
And that's FOIA.gov.
Yes, and there they have a list of all different, and this is more at the federal level, right? So this is another thing that your audience need to understand. Navigating the system might be a bit different depending if you are looking at the federal law, if you are interested to get information by federal agencies rather than state level, right?
Yeah,
So those
yeah.
are the differences. And then there is also FOIA Mapper. It's another resource. It's really good. It gives you it gives you access to what others have asked for, what type of information other people have asked you before, so you can see maybe some information you are interested, somebody has asked it and they publish that. So I think your audiences need to also understand the utility of open data. Basically, this means that the open government data, it's another system that obliges the different agencies to publish proactively information, and I think your audience should not actually underestimate, because there is lots of it that is already placed out there by governmental agencies or by third parties. For example, the Texas Tribune has an amazing resource of data that they have accumulated and they place there for their users to just use it, right?
Including salaries.
Oh, salaries, yes. If you are interested to see how much money all the
You
governmental, including myself, you can go there and you can check it out.
We just lost the light there, but sorry, keep going.
So that's the other thing. Basically, you need to understand that some of this information that you might be asking or interested might be already available out there without you having to even use FOIA
Thinking
to
that
get
you
there.
have a battle to fight
Exactly.
when in fact it's something that's there.
Houston has an open data portal. It's kind of a third-party generated. Sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, but most time does work.
Okay.
So you can look at the Houston, or just Google it, Houston Open Data Portal, and then it's going to give you different resources of information that already published out there. So you might find what you need that has been published. And again, these are all consequences of having such laws in practice, having legislation that obliges, or having very strong civil society groups that have used this law efficiently and made all this information available publicly to citizens, including yes.
Yeah. So we're getting close to the end of our Facebook Live, so thank you for all of your questions, but maybe some final thoughts about this topic, because I know it's actually something they both enjoy talking about, perhaps complaining about a little bit over on this side.
No.
But, so final thoughts from you on this topic and on Sunshine Week.
Well, as I said earlier, these laws are as good as you use them. If you use them, they're going to get better. If you don't use them, they honestly end up being just a piece of paper in a drawer somewhere, right? So the more they are used, the better results they get, because if you use the law more, then you show their weaknesses, you show where improvements needs to be, and the more cases like Scott's cases are there to prove this is problematic, it has to be changed, right? Then the better chances that's going to be changed and improved. So I guess I would just really say to your audience, don't be discouraged by these horror stories, and try your best to really use these laws and make them efficient for your own personal needs. But because that's the only way we can actually make sense and make, I guess, some good outcomes out of these laws that exist there.
Sure. Makes sense.
And it's
Scott?
one thing when we're the ones complaining and lawmakers hear the same voices over and over and over.
As in like annoying reporters?
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Saying, I can't get this, I can't get this, I can't get this. But when they start to hear it from the people, when they hear it from the voters saying, this doesn't make any sense, I should be able to get this. This was my tax dollars funded this study. Why can't I see it? Or, the government gives this group money. Why can't I find out what happens to the money then? When enough people start complaining about it, they're the ones that pay those lawmakers. They're the ones that keep those lawmakers in office. That's how things are going to change. It's not going to be from a few reporters constantly whining and saying, I want more, I want more, I want more.
Yeah.
It's going to be the people saying, I want that power back. I want you to follow the intent of this law, not what this law has become basically in practice.
Someone actually asked if we could post the websites that we talked about, and the answer is yes. As soon as we are done here, I will make sure those end up underneath this video. So if you check back in just a little while, we'll put them up there. Thank you, Scott, for coming from your desk over here.
I know.
And
Long
Lindita,
trip.
thank you for coming from the University of Houston.
It was a pleasure.
It was interesting, and thank you all for joining us.
Thanks.
Yeah, and thank you for doing this.